Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join Jack Stafford and Deborah Littleboy, members of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Ali Siadatan. Siadatan.
Yes.
Say it for us.
I practiced that before the show, and I've embarrassed myself. I've embarrassed Deborah. I've embarrassed the whole Mysticast team. I'm sorry.
Not at all. Nobody gets it right.
Excellent.
You don't care because you're in such a good mood about all these UFO revelations.
Yes.
So you must be on cloud 9, which would be a good place to view UFOs because you're up higher. So how did you get interested in UFOs? Give us your story.
How did I get interested in UFOs? It was two events. So one was I was always on a spiritual quest since I was young, and I studied with different teachers. At this time, I was studying with someone who was interested in the Bible, and he was a Christian, and he said, let's look at the scroll of Ezekiel, which is an Old Testament scroll. And I was like, okay, I had no idea what we're going to look at. But as we read it, he said, I want you guys to draw what you think he's saying. And as we were kind of drawing, the idea started to emerge that could it be that he's actually, even though he's talking about the presence of God coming on this throne, but is it still something that moves around and carries things around? And then the conversation opened up to the whole idea that maybe there's a connection between this whole idea of angels and UFOs. And it intrigued me. And I started to look into the ancient astronaut theorists like von Däniken, the Chariot of the Gods, Zacharias Sitchin, things like that. And I realized, there was a kind of an interesting way of revisiting old myth. Maybe it wasn't myth, maybe it was historical accounts, with the evidence of this phenomenon. Maybe people in the past were seeing it, and the prophets of the Bible as well. And so that kind of got me thinking about it. But then when I went to Iran in 1999 to visit my dad, and we had a close-up sighting in the desert, his wife, him and I, driving late at night in the desert between Tehran and Isfahan, and it was a close-up UFO sighting, and seeing one so close where you could see the details and everything, well, that made it very real. And so I started to really took the deep dive. They say seeing is believing, and took the deep dive into looking into it. And that led to the creation of a documentary that people can see on my website called UFOs, Angels, and Gods, that you can watch on thinkagainproductions.com, which was kind of the fruits of the research.
Wonderful. It's great to meet a kindred spirit like yourself. Really, we're right on the money.
Yes. Thank you.
I mean, they talk in the society about the Star of Bethlehem as one of the most famous UFO encounters of all time.
Right. Yes. Follow the leader. Yes. Like there's a bright light in the sky, you follow it, and then stars don't usually appear and disappear, and they don't come to a standstill on a specific location. And in the modern day UFO phenomenon, that is something that people talk about, follow the leader. The bright light appears at night and they kind of follow this bright light. The question then became, in my mind, are we talking about UFOs throughout all of these stories? Or are we talking about a new understanding of the nature of angels? Is the character still, the same as the text implies, but the way that, let's say, the medieval church would have understood it was the myth. The angels perhaps live in, or exist in the physical universe, in the heavens, as the older language would call it, and they have these chariots, these flying vehicles, and this is the nature of the world of angels. The we're still in a cosmic tale that involves, this great story that we're told and all these beings. So for me, it became about rethinking the nature of the world of these beings, which actually made the story more real, rather than replacing the characters with the Darwinian concept of aliens.
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I'm so with you, Ali, because when I found I was Christian, not heavily practicing, but I'd read through the Bible a few times, not really understood what I was reading, but went through it. And then I found the Society. And when I started to really study the Society, I understood the Bible better. It's just like the stuff that I didn't understand suddenly became, well, that's obvious, isn't it? In my mind. And so, as you say, the messengers or the angels, we use the term cosmic masters, and they are bringing the message. They higher intelligences on different frequencies of vibration, and they fly around in spaceships. And they're bringing messages, and they're beaming down energy to us to try and lift our vibrations, to bring us out of the terrible pit of turmoil that we've created for ourselves. So yeah, I see it that the space, the vehicle carries the angels. The angels we call cosmic masters, and most of the spaceships of the cosmic masters are from our solar system. Now that just put a whole new concept on for me with our teachings. Not all of them, but most of them are in our solar system that come to here to help us. And that makes sense because you help your brothers and your sisters. So yeah, it's and yet when I speak this to people that haven't investigated like yourself and others, I can see them glaze over and think, oh, she's off on one again. So when now if you like, now things are being revealed,
yes,
that they're real.
Yes.
I feel vindicated, and I said to Jack before we come on, I would imagine that you if you were anything like me, I would be dancing around saying, like, "See, I told you so. Look, I actually had that. Look at what I was saying back in. Look.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know whether you've got that sense.
If family and friends are calling me suddenly saying, "Okay, we want to hear your thoughts." It's this is a new. It's coming out of the woodworks, and it's going to get louder as we go forward. So you brought out some interesting points about the identity. So we know this is real. These beings are real. They're here with us. There's no denying it. And there's many historical accounts of this contact, including in the Bible. And now the question is, who are they? How do we define these terms? Are they cosmic masters? Are they angels? What are their intentions? When I started to look into empirical evidence, as they call it, see, like, what have we collected, like, without any point of view, just like facts. So you had, the writings of Alan Hynek, who came up with the three divisions, the close encounters of first, second, and third kind. And I'm sure you guys know about Alan Hynek. He's was in charge of Project Blue Book. He was hired by the U.S. Air Force for 20 years. He flew around on the Air Force's dime, collecting information from all over the states. Because in 1948 to 1968, the atmosphere about UFO research in America was open. Everyone talked about it. You weren't insane. People who it was on the news. It was in Life magazine. Generals talked about it. There was an open research that the government was conducting into this, and J. Allen Hynek was the astronomer. His job was to, remove anything that could not be explained as a natural phenomenon, and give the rest to the Air Force to further investigation, and they were going to report to Congress. it didn't quite go that way. They gave the information to another Professor Condon, who didn't really believe in it, and he just debunked it, and that became kind of the narrative. So then Hynek wrote a book called UFOs, a Scientific Inquiry, where he said, look, everything that people gave me, pictures, testimonies, everything fit within these, 5 categories. And even this whole bright lights in the sky is one of the categories. What I had was a close encounter of the first kind, 500 feet or closer. But then there was more evidence coming out, and other researchers started to look into abductions. People were coming out and saying, look, we're being abducted. And there was John Mack, who was head of psychiatry at Harvard, and he wrote a book called Abductions in 1994, where he kind of shocked the academic world. Everyone thought, he said he was going to look into it, and he was going to prove that this is a modern psychiatric disorder akin to demon possession from the Middle Ages. But he kind of shocked the academic world by writing a book called Abductions, where he said, you know what, actually, I've changed my mind. It's real. These people are really telling the truth. Everything they say corresponds to the way that people speak when they tell the truth. And also, there are people of, have important jobs in our society, and it would be kind of crazy for them to start saying this. The fact that they're saying it, they have nothing to gain from it. It's true. And the other one was Professor David Jacobs from Temple University in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. He I think, really became the world's foremost researcher of this whole aspect of this phenomenon. Last time I spoke with him, he had 1,200 accounts, and everyone says the same thing. And these are people from all walks of life. And so what people were saying is that they were being, essentially, this is kind of the short of it, that they're being abducted. Semen is removed from the men. Women are impregnated. They go to their doctor. The doctor says, congratulations, you're pregnant. And they're like, well, I haven't had sex, in 20 years. I don't have anybody in my life. And the doctor's like, well, you're pregnant. And then by the first trimester, the woman is abducted, and by close to the end of it, and the fetus is removed. The doctor says, oh, you had a miscarriage. And again, the woman is like, I would have known if I had a miscarriage. And usually they're diagnosed with, I forget the name, it's got a big Latin word, which basically means you want to get pregnant so badly that you display the symptoms of pregnancy. But that's, these people are like, I have no intention. But this is part of it. Everyone says the same story. The abductions happen mostly during the day. People float out their window and doors into these crafts. It's pretty well documented. Hybrids are being created. And that really caught my attention. At first, I thought it was crazy. But when I started to read the research and see who was writing about it and how it was collected, I realized, well, these stories are as real as people saying, I saw something in the night sky. And so that brought to life another aspect of ancient tales, which was this whole concept of the Nephilim in the Bible. The demigods is usually a term used in the common culture. They come from everywhere, the children of the gods and men. And that was something interesting, that I suddenly could see all these passages that talked about the giants, like Goliath was a descendant of one. All of these passages were coming to life. The sons of God and daughters of men had children that led to a civilization that led to the great flood. And so now that story suddenly, I could see these entities. I could see the idea of hybrid offsprings throughout the ages. Even the parable of wheat and tares that talks about how, God planted his seed in the garden and the devil planted his seed, and the two got, intermixed. This whole concept was a great revelation, because it started to open up the nature of the beings. Oh, I see. There's a reason they're not landing on the lawn of the White House and saying hello, is because they have an agenda of their own. They're creating hybrids. To what end? And so I started to see that there actually is two sides to them, and one is evil and one is good, and that it makes it more difficult to understand, to accept, or to believe any information that's coming through. Because how do we know we're not being deceived? how do we know that the one that is presenting itself as an angel of light, it said that even, Satan can present himself as an angel of light and his ministers as ministers of righteousness. What if we're being deceived? And how do we know who to believe? Which side is saying what? And so you kind of come to a wall where you can impose human thoughts and values on them. We essentially humanize them in their thinking system and assume that they are just more evolved versions of whatever it is that we consider to be enlightened. So when I started to trust more and more the historical accounts of the scripture and the prophetic accounts, I started to think, okay, this is actually, the document that's going to tell me who's who, because it presents a story. It presents a tale that goes through the ages all the way to the 20th century. And the tale it tells is that the nations were divided and given into the hands of these beings called the sons of God. And Jacob, was chosen by God for his purposes. There was a spiritual division. And when I looked into the gods of the ancient world, now that I had this view of the reality of beings, I realized that all the civilizations attributed their genesis to the gods. In fact, civilization itself begins with codes of knowledge that are handed down. The most recent example to us from where we are in history looking back is Muhammad. You've got the Arabs, they have an oral culture, and they're flanked by two great civilizations and empires, the Greek and the Persian. They basically live in the middle of the desert and have a monopoly over camels. That's how they protect themselves. You can't get to the middle of the desert without camels. And suddenly one of them, Muhammad, says, look, I'm receiving a message, the recitation. And the download comes, and then those words are written down once he dies. And lo and behold, the Islamic civilization is born with a code of understanding of life, of who God is, how one ought to live. Every aspect of life is codified, and there is a strength behind it. And within 100 years, the Greek and Persian empire falls, and the Islamic world with its current map is born. Constantinopolis eventually falls in 1453 and becomes, Istanbul. Really only the heartland of Greece remains, Athens, like the heartland of Greece. The rest falls. And so this is basically the tale of all the civilizations. Moses goes on top of a hill, receives a download. He was the first person to receive a download from the cloud. And he receives a download, he comes down, and the Hebrew civilization is born with its laws, its ideas of God, kings, priests. It's very complex, actually. And those teachings continue to influence our thinking to this day.
I see there are quite a few parallels. Deborah sent you some material from the Aetherius Society. Did you have a chance to read some of that? Ali, can you hear me?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, you sent me material, or?
Yeah, Deborah sent you an email with some of the teachings of the society and what we want to talk about. And
oh, yes. You want to talk about the prophecy, the purpose of these beings in prophecy. That's what.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to check out some of the Aetherius Society? Because you've studied all these ancient texts and you've done a lot of research. Did you, when you researched the Aetherius Society, did you see anything that chimes?
Well, no. To be honest, I haven't. I didn't see that email. To be honest, I just saw the email that said we would like to talk about the UFOs in prophecy, and that's going to be the main topic.
I think it's in that email. Yeah, it's in that email.
I can look it up right now if you'd like me to do that. And the
There's something I'd like to jump in with. So, going back to your encounter, Ali, where you had this, can you explain what that ship was like? because I've got descriptions of different ships here that we've been told about, and I'm interested to see whether there's any correlation between what you saw and what I've got here on my list of possibles, if you want.
Yes.
Just to see.
What I saw was very large and spherical. Like if it was on the ground, it would be a 3-4 story low rise. And it was huge. I could see division on it, like it had levels. And I could see a pulsating green light. And it was close enough that I could see that there was a multitude of green lights on it. And that's why that was the source, I assume, of the green light, of the pulsating light. And it was slowly coming down and it was eventually perpendicular to the car. A large black tube came out of the earth, and this thing went on top of the tube and it went into the ground. So it was coming down, it went on top of the tube and went on the ground, and the tube was just dark like the desert night. If you were not this close to it, you wouldn't see the tube. It was like camouflaged. And of course, the question came to my mind is, how long have these beings been in the ground? The identity of these beings, basically, I think what I'm suggesting is that the source of revelation has to be questioned. Who are these beings? What are their purposes? And what is the context we're going to choose to identify them? These, I think, are important questions for me, because the evidence, there's lots of evidence that shows me that it's not all good,
What we're told
yes,
is that we have to be really discerning and discriminate with the evidence that we're given. And what we're told by Dr. King is that if the message is not for the good of everybody, if there is a division and us versus them, then run a million miles from it, because the message from the people, the space people that he had messages from, was all about for the whole of humanity, not different countries, no rich and no poor. We're all in it together to raise our vibrations and make a better world. And if the message was not for everybody, then turn around and run away.
This background, all the great religions came from the cosmic masters. In the Master Jesus, he says, "I'm from the brighter morning star" in the Bible. That's the Venus. And above the Star of Bethlehem was in the Bible. The Buddha had, I think, 5 stars, UFOs. So all these masters, Krishna too, they incarnate through the womb of a woman to take on karma. This is the law of karma. They can't just come down and help us. So they've brought us all the great teachings, all the great religions, which share the same common truths of, love thy neighbor and all the same essence, the red line through all the great teachings. So if that fits in line with it, then, but it sounds like what you're saying is division. So maybe you could expand.
Oh yeah. So I realized when I read all these texts, I realized that they're very different from each other. They don't say the same thing at all. They present a completely different understanding of God, of how one reaches God, and what truth is, and what righteousness is, and what right living is. Love your neighbor as yourself is definitely not an Islamic teaching from the Quran. It is
in the Buddhism and in Christianity. And
the Buddhism is a religion. The Buddha was breaking away from Hinduism, and Hinduism, believes in the transmigration of souls and the idea that you're reincarnated.
That was in the Bible, but it was taken out in 400 AD.
And you're kind of walking up towards a place where you break free of the wheel of samsara. the Buddha had the idea that, the way to do that, he created his own version of Hinduism, where through sitting meditation, one breaks free from the world of illusion and transcends to a place of non-duality. And in that state, once you reach that state, then you'll be, get out of the wheel of incarnation. You'll transcend. You'll become a bodhisattva. With Jesus, the idea was that historically man had been separated from God through historical events and modified, and man was in a cosmic tale. The purpose of man is to enter the temple at the heart of time and space and bring the instructions of God to the whole of the created order, and to place man back into his destiny. A sacrifice is required of a pure and sinless human being. And since there is no such person, God himself, comes to earth to fulfill that, and faith in him removes.
Well, you might be missing up the testaments, but basically they say the same thing, but in different coded languages, because they're a different audience, you see, different levels of intelligence. So yes, you do become a bodhisattva when you go through cosmic enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, and then ascension. You can leave this cycle of rebirth on this planet, and then you can incarnate on other planets, or you can stay here to serve in the Great White Brotherhood of the spiritual hierarchy of Earth. So yes, he's right. You do go to a nirvana, a state of bliss beyond this, but you haven't gone back. You haven't joined back with the absolute, because that takes millions more incarnations. And then Jesus was talking about, you reach a higher state of heaven when it's in a different coded language.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that you receive a new body and all that, but then the prophecies talk about a time where there's a final empire, the Jews come back, Jerusalem becomes a land of contention, and the Messiah returns to establish on this earth a new age. And this new age is where all of this is headed. The question that you guys asked about, what is the role of
that's also in the Aetherius Society teachings. Yeah, in 1,000 years, approximately, a new master will come.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all the religions talk about a final, like, Messiah. Buddhism talks about it as well. There's messianic ideas in Islam.
Common truths between all the great religions.
They cast it in a different light, meaning that only one of them can be true. Like, for instance, the Islamic concept of the Mahdi is very different from the Jewish concept of the Messiah. And what comes once that person comes what they bring is very different as well. I think that we can cast them in that light, that they're all just different versions of the same story spoken to different people in different languages. We can cast the information in that light. But
the Great Flood is in all the teachings as well.
Yes, but the reason behind it is different. And they're historical events that have been reinterpreted, and now the question becomes, who's got the truth, if anything. And the division and reconciliation idea, yes, there has to be reconciliation and the end of division, but what is that one truth that reconciles us all together? The biblical prophecy suggests that we're headed towards a cosmic war, that the second coming of Jesus is cast as an alien invasion. And the world leader who's here, supported by the dark angels, who also travel in these ships, gather the nations to battle him, because they cast him not as the Son of God, not as, the voice of heaven, but rather as an invading alien force.
Well, I think it's great you've done all this research, but you're drawing all your own conclusions from this. So you're kind of autodidactic religious scholar. So you've come to your own conclusions. But if you'd studied metaphysics a bit more and the teachings of the Aetherius Society, you can see that you're on the right track. It's like the blind man and the elephant. You're feeling the elephant, and you've got to, this part's like a tree.
I know that story. That's a great story. Yeah.
But it's all true, but it's the interpretation, because the apocalypse, the foretold apocalypse, did happen in the 1960s, but it was in the lower astral realms. The forces of light fought the forces of darkness in the greatest battle the world has ever known, but it was not on this frequency. It was on the lower astral realms. And Dr. King and the six adepts took on the forces of darkness, transmuted Satan, and now the prophesied new age can come. So we go to planet X, which is behind the sun on another orbit, and then approximately 1,000 years or something like that, when because this Mother Earth, the great living being that we're on, has to go on to further levels. She can't hold back her initiation for any longer. Did I miss
Yes.
anything, Deborah?
That's in a nutshell what our teachings say to us. But in a nutshell, that's what we're told. What I draw from what you're telling us, Ali, from your investigations and your personal experiences, is that you've been, as I say, bringing all this information in, and you've identified that there are entities that are not for the greater good, and there are entities which are for the greater good. So we've got if you're calling them dark angels and other angels, and that's not dissimilar to our teachings either, because we're told that there are 11 levels of realms that we live on Earth. So we're on level 1, and there's 4 below us, and as they get increasingly more selfish and more power greedy and all those things which are abhorrent to bringing us together on these lower realms, and above we have seven higher ones, but the 7th one is too high a vibration for anybody to be on. So we have got this fight, and we're seeing it played out here on this level 1. And we are seeing it every day, this fight between selfishness and selflessness. So we've got people that are working together to bring up the vibrations and work together, and we've got other people that are all about power greedy. And I think that's what's played out, if in my humble opinion, is what's been played out throughout all the religions since anything's been recorded. It's always that good versus evil fight, and the good guys and the bad guys, and then things fall down and we start again, and we're going to learn from our mistakes, but hey, we don't, and on it goes, and like Chinese whispers, it each morphs into its own individuality. But actually,
these are interesting ideas. So that's what I mean. When I put myself in the place of a person who has no beliefs, and I look at and I see all these different versions of explanation, and one is the one that you guys are offering. The different schools of thought will offer different, explanations. And so I came to the conclusion that the one that I thought had the most weight when I looked at many different aspects of reality was the biblical text. And so, yes, there's a conflict, but this is the ultimate view that we in this cosmos from the beginning have been part of a much larger story, because there are many beings. God has entered time and space and has created, and he's eventually created beings on this planet in his own image, these image bearers. And one of these other beings didn't want to accept the way things were. He wanted to be the first order of creation. He wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be like God. And 1/3 of the angels, or these terms can sometimes trigger ideas in our minds from Christian culture and history, but 1/3 of these beings go with this guy, and they are given, sovereignty over the nations, and they give this revelation, and God speaks through the prophets of Israel, and eventually comes in the form of his son, and then sends the Spirit to the nations, and that's what breaks the bondage of polytheism over the nations and brings about monotheism. The story of the God of Israel and his son become world famous. And so that is the tale that kind of gives me the perspective yes, Zoroastrianism will give its own explanation of this conflict, and the teachings of Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita will have their own approach as to how one becomes united with Krishna and who Krishna is. And so it depends, which you have your own, like these ascended masters, these levels, these 11 levels, these battles that have happened in the 1960s. This is its own school of thought. And so when you're kind of a seeker, you see all these schools of thoughts. Now, I eventually came to have a profound spiritual experience with God through Jesus. And so my eyes opened to the veracity of this document. And through it, I began to understand who these beings were and where we were in the story, and where we're headed. The idea of mediums, the people who receive revelation, this is as old as civilization itself, right? There has always been mediums, and whether the mediums, put the identity of those who give them this revelation in the language of an older culture, like there are spirits, there are gods, or whether they put them in the context of the modern scientific age, post Galileo, that they are aliens, or mix them. They become cosmic masters. They're kind of a mixture of aliens and spirits. The idea of mediums receiving knowledge and teaching that knowledge is very old. So that's one thing. But for me, well, God Himself has spoken. So why not go to the source? The UFO phenomenon is coming out of the woodworks, perhaps because there's going to be a world leader, like this book suggests, and he is going to create a final empire. Look at like the rise of AI, and the digital currency, the fear that has been cast into the world since the pandemic, the environment, like you mentioned, the idea that the Gaia needs healing of some kind. These are all very, very old ideas, but they can be rebranded in scientific clothing and used to rally people under dictatorship. So it's possible that the world leader does make the claim that these beings are behind him, like the scripture suggests, and rallies the nations against the second coming of Christ, right? That kind of becomes where this is going as far as biblical prophecy is concerned. And God is the one that brings spiritual evolution and a new age of history. And He has a plan. God has a design for history itself. And so, yes, that's kind of what I gravitated towards as far as how am I going to put all this information together? But you're offering, from my point of view, is another perspective, right? You're offering another perspective. And it's unifying a lot of ideas around its own vision. It's drawing and unifying around its own central vision. And so, yeah, from the beginning of the UFO phenomenon, there are people that began to say that, like from the 40s on, that they were receiving revelation from cosmic masters. That's not new. So where do you guys think all of this is going, like over the next 20 years?
Well, 20 years is only a short time, but I think that the more that people realize that we've been fed lies, the more that the revelations come out that things have been hidden, the more people will then start to work together. This is maybe my hope, but this is what we're told. So the more that we work together, the more we understand what our bodies are, and we know how to use them, because they're only robots. So we've got access to higher vibrational frequencies if we just use our body properly. So we've got to breathe properly, we've got to eat properly, we've got to exercise properly, we've got to think properly. So once we've actually learnt that, and more like meditation is coming into play now, people understand that they have to be discriminate and have to think about things and not just believe whatever they're told. So we are becoming more thinking, and as society becomes more thinking, and then there are people that want to build a better world because they're sick to death of fighting and greed and all those things, then I think the tides will turn.
Doctor,
I don't think that we're going to destroy ourselves.
The masters also said that first they would be the silence group, that they would deny the UFOs. And then the second phase 2 would be that they would say they'd come to harm us, that they're an enemy. And we need to unite against this common enemy. And maybe, go towards a world government, as you suggest. But so we must be very clear that, if they wanted to invade us before, if they wanted to hurt us, they don't need to do the odd abduction. They have, their powers are far, far, far superior to ours. So they could.
And what is the third phase?
Third
you phase? Said first phase, second, they'll be seen as enemies. You're saying first, the new world. Then they will be seen as enemies. What's the third one?
Third phase, I don't know. I guess, like Deborah says, hopefully a good one.
The third phase is that when we're ready, the master will come. He'll come in all his powers, we're told. And the world authorities will ask for his credentials, and he'll give those. His might will be greater than all the armies. This is a prophecy I'm giving you now, Ali. And he will lead those that don't want to heed his words will be removed from the earth. Not like immediately. No, you go. But on reincarnation, they will then go to a younger planet, which they need to relearn their lessons, to go through all the hell that we've recreated over and over and over, and they'd have to relive that again. The souls that are ready to work together as beings of light, I'm using like the sort of open technology terminology here, will work together under this master, the God's laws, if you want, karmic laws, and we will rebuild this earth. We will allow Gaia to heal, and we'll live together in harmony. But it's not. There
was Adamic man here before us. That's in the Bible as well. Adam is allegorical, but Adamic man. We came from the planet Maldek, which is the asteroid belt now. We destroyed the planet Maldek through nuclear experimentation. Then we came here. We went through the civilizations of Lemurius and Atlantis. And it's also, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. It's in the Upanishads, the Ramayana. It's all in all the ancient texts that man's history is written there. So it's all in coded language, as you say. So, but you're really on the right track. I mean, you're on the Bible is a UFO book. I mean, yeah.
For me,
it reveals the identity of the UFOs, and the UFOs act like a key that demythologize this. The story of the planet that was there, between Mars and Jupiter, that was destroyed, and then the asteroid belt is what's left of it, and the rest of it, where did it go? Some say it became Earth itself. This is the idea that you guys are sharing is a distinct story. It's its own story, right? The Shias, they're really into this idea of a Mahdi. The Muslims have their own understanding of how all this is going to come to a head, and how the universalism of Islam will be proclaimed. And then the messianic view of the prophets of Israel, that the Messiah comes and establishes an age of peace. But the idea, the descriptions are different. They're very different. Which one is going to actually unfold? I know that
if you go and study the 9 Freedoms, the book that Dr. King channeled, maybe you come back on the show, and then we, because you have such an educated man, you've really, studied so much of all the different, you're much more knowledgeable than I am about these ancient texts. So maybe you could draw some comparisons and see if any of these truths resonate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that is the idea of channeling in mediums is a very ancient idea. And how do you know that the entity that Dr. King channeled was benevolent?
From the messages that come through, which is where I come from now, that they, right the way across the decades, the messages were always for oneness. There was never any division. It was always for oneness. And so there was no break of like, my dad's bigger than your dad type of thing. It was all for the planet itself to evolve. And so it could only be for the good of everybody and everything that's living on the planet. So there's no harm. There's no evil intent. In fact, there's practical applications on how to raise the vibrations of everybody. Not by just sitting there thinking it, of actually how you can make a better world. So yeah, that's why I was drawn to the teachers in the first place, that there was that practical approach to almost like a help the person that's in front of you, and then help the people that are in front of them.
Yeah, the heart of Christianity as well.
We're all in together. Yeah.
So. Yeah. The no, it's very interesting. I guess patience is required. And how in your thinking, where does God fit in all of it?
God is the absolute, the all in all that, everything, you, me, this microphone. And then, so there's that mono God you talked about earlier. And then, but below that, we're all evolving back to God, because God did the outbreath and created everything. And now a small part of itself. And now we're all evolving back and accumulating back to God. So we eventually we amalgamate back to God to form planets, suns, galaxies, a living being, everything's living, eventually going back to God. So Jesus was a God to us. The sun is the God in the Bible, the Brahma in the Hindu scripts. There are supreme lords of karma. There are the angels. They're all gods to us because we're pretty low down. Everyone on any other planet is a cosmic being. They're gods to us. So there are many gods, and there are devas as well. So he's infinite, but there is only the absolute one God.
The grand designer, the blueprint writer.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And has the blueprint been revealed perhaps through the voice of these prophets and through the voice of Jesus? Has God shared his light with us?
I think you have to leave this planet to know more than
what we are told is that God is the eternal simple, and there is nothing else and only it. And anything that goes away from the silence, from the no moving, the no thinking, the silence, the void, is actually a division away from the...
There can't be complexity. There can only be one, because anything else would be complexity, and that wouldn't be perfect.
Dualism doesn't work in our teachings. There is only one. But to be able to experience things, we've had to make duality, because otherwise we wouldn't.
There's positive and negative.
We wouldn't even be a manifestation. So there had to have been that split so that each side can sort of counterjust with
to learn,
yield,
go back,
yield and push. But that's just an illusion as well in our teachings. That's what we believe.
Yeah, no, it's a complete system of thought. The prophecies, as far as where is it all going, since that's one of the questions you asked me. So I found it interesting that it was written in a system of puzzles, meaning that every prophet did not know what he was receiving. It was just a small piece of information, like a program, a room of programmers, where everyone receives a piece of program.
Like the blind man and the elephant, yeah.
Yeah, like exactly. Then they don't see the whole program, and they all just type in their portion. But at the end, when you press play, a coherent image appears on the screen. So all the prophets, they're giving the different camera angles into this great final event.
What we try and do on this show, we try and see the truth in everyone's teachings, and I've really seen the truth in yours with the, this recognition of the UFOs in the Bible. So
yeah, the UFOs in the Bible, what they do is for me, they demythologize the concept of angels, their interaction, their hybrids, and then the biblical narrative provides the identity of who are they really and what's going on.
And it's also important to focus on the message, because
how have they affected history and where is it all going?
Yeah.
So, for instance, there is this prophecy that is very similar to countless other ones. It talks about physical, like real things, real events, in the real world. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to wage war. And then it talks about, in that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which lies to the east of Jerusalem, and talks about, the Mount of Olives being divided, and the enemies are struck by a plague. Then all the survivors from all the nations that attacked Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, which is like these beings, and to celebrate Sukkot, which is the Feast of Booths. And so it ushers, a new age is ushered in. There's a battle. Now, is it allegorical? Is it metaphorical? Could we take it literally? Well, with the return of Israel to this land and the rebirth of Jerusalem and the contention that's around it, and now there's so many more signs, like the sign of the UFOs, and there's prophecies about the return of hybrid civilizations. Oh wow, suddenly there are hybrids among us. When you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, there are gaps as to how are we going to get to this moment in history. But this is kind of one picture of where it's going. It's very precise. And then the idea that there's a lie, there's a deception, and
well, we're coming to the end of the show, and as I say, you've got so many examples. You can quote, ad verbatim. So it's really interesting to speak to you. But if you study the 9 freedoms, it gives some amazing descriptions there. Come back on the show, and we'll continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jack.
Where can people find more about you?
Just go to my website, thinkagainproductions.com, and everything is there. You can watch my documentary for free. It's right on the website. You can leave a donation if you want to, and you can double click and go on my YouTube page and look at some more videos, but everything's on the website.
All right. Well, thanks. I really admire your energy, Ali, and your enthusiasm, and keep it up. If people are interested in the Aetherius Society, they can go to Aetherius.org. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with us.
No, it's very appreciative. Thank you. I learned a lot from your perspective as well.
I'm really pleased. Thank you.